Hey everybody, Steve here. Ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to write comic books. I thought that would be the coolest job in the world, is to write comic books. Spider-Man comic books especially. But I didn't know how to break into comics. And I had other ideas for other comic books, my own ideas for comic books. And I sat on those ideas for years and years and years until my wife finally said, "Why don't you take all those ideas and turn them into books instead of comic books?" So I did. So I write superhero fiction books. It's a small niche, but it's a niche nonetheless. And I've had other people who've watched this channel and watched my videos. They've commented and they've messaged me and wanting to know my method for writing an outline, for getting things started. And I will start by saying I watched a lot of YouTube videos when I first started writing. And a lot of them were some very pretentious people. Stark white rooms with bookshelves full of books, and they're all color coded by the cover. And normally, a lot of them would say, "These are the five things you must never put in your book unless you never want people to read your book ever again." And it got a little intimidating. I didn't find a whole lot of good information on YouTube, just a lot of what you should and shouldn't do. Well, let me start by saying I'm not going to say that. I'm never going to tell you guys what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Art is your thing. And the great thing about art and writing in particular is it doesn't matter how you get from point A to point B, as long as you take the journey. So hopefully this video will inspire you to take this journey and start writing your book. And the first thing you should know is, well, know where you're going. When I start a book, I already know the beginning, the middle, and the end. I have the characters in my head. I have the plot. I have the everything I need for the book is in my head, and especially I know exactly where I want the book to start. I have a really good idea of how the middle's going to go, and I know exactly how I want the book to end. I know exactly where I want the characters to be at the end of the book. Now the plan is filling out everything else. And that's number 2, start where you want to. Yeah. I write my outlines in a kind of bullet point paragraph where I will write chapter 1 and I will write everything I want to have happen in that chapter. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. And then I'll move on to chapter 2, and I'll do it that way. There are some points where I'll get towards the middle where there are chapters I know I want, but I won't put any heading. I'll just put chapter blank. That way I can move things around, which I'll show you in a minute. Now, my method, like I said, it's very simple. It's bullet points. It's chapter by chapter by chapter. It's not really detailed like some writers will get. And the way you put your outline out probably will depend on one of two things. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Now, if you were watching this video, you probably have watched other writing videos. You might have come across the terms plotter and pantser. so you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please enjoy these definitions of plotter and pantser. And on the other side, we'll get back to it. So, plotter. This is a writer who's going to write everything down, every detail they have for chapter. You know, the characters. They write down the places. They're going to write down any magic systems if they're working in fantasy, any kind of aliens and species if they're going sci-fi, and every little point is written out in this outline. It is the most detailed roadmap you can possibly make. So when it's time for you to write, you sit down and the book's almost written. All you got to do is fill in the talking. The talking. Panzer. A panzer, like the definition said, somebody who just wings it. They just go out there and they just sit down and they just start writing. They don't have an outline. Now, they have an idea. They have a plot. They have characters. They know what they want what their book to be about. They have a general idea of where it wants to go, but they just sit down and write. And they just go and go and go and go and go and go. Now, some very notable pantsers that you may know about. Mark Twain. Apparently he's a very notable pantser. Ernest Hemingway. Dean Koontz. And Stephen King. Stephen King can write. He can write a heck of a book. But if you're a fan of Stephen King, you know sometimes his endings get a little wonky. They kind of it's a great story, you know, great characters, everything. You're diving in, and then just like 3/4, 4/5 of the way through the book, he knows he's got to end it, but he's got all these plot threads that are just kind of dangling around. It's almost like he just kind of winds everything up and just throws it out there, like end. So some of his endings are great. Some of his endings make you want to scratch your head. Like, all right, we got there, but it's kind of odd. But hey, he knows what he's doing. I mean, you can't fault the man for doing the way he does because he's extremely famous. He's made quite the name for himself. And so it's working for him. So are you a plotter or a pantser? Are you somebody who's going to write down every little detail? Are you going to write, or are you just going to wing it? I myself like to think of myself as kind of an 80-20 guy. I'm an 80% plotter, 20% pantser. And let me show you how I do mine to give you a better idea. So here we are, writing your outline. When I wrote Deadlock, I had this story in my head for decades, probably a good 20 years, just sitting there. And you know it was a good idea because it went for 20 years and the idea never left. It just sat there. So eventually, when my wife said, just go ahead and write these books, I grabbed my laptop, set it on the kitchen table, and I banged out the first 4 chapters. Quick. I think I did it in 4 chapters, 2 days. I just spit them right out. But then I got to a point where I knew I needed to get to the end. I knew how I wanted to get to the end. But there was a lot of hazy stuff in the middle. So I needed to write an outline. This is what I wrote it in. This is that outline. Just some pages. But it got me through. I was able to finish the book. And again, it was a pretty good book. It was well received by everyone who read it. Not many people have read it, but very, very. I'm not well known, but I'm working on that. Then Fallout came out, the next book, and I kind of tweaked the process. This is the outline for Fallout. Each one of these is a chapter. And I would write each one chapter. As you can see, chapter, and then there's nothing there. Didn't know where I exactly wanted it in the book. And then I would write them, staple it together. Then once I got all the chapters done, this isn't the whole outline, it's just part of it. I put them together, and I could read it like a book. And if I didn't like where one of the chapters was, I could go ahead and I could move it around to somewhere else. Or I can go, you know what? This chapter, it just doesn't work. And I can toss it. That's how I wrote my second book. Now we come to book 3. I'm not going to show you exactly what's going on. I can show you a little bit. Book 3 outline. It's about 20 pages, and I kind of combined the outlines for Deadlock and Fallout. I took the bullet point idea, like I used in Deadlock, and I wrote each chapter as a paragraph or 2 paragraphs of everything I want to have happen in this story. Now, I've written the first 2. Book 3 is a continuation, so I know all the characters, I know the plot, I know exactly where the story's going. So I don't need a very detailed outline to know where I'm going. That's why I wrote the way I did. I do have another book idea coming up after this. Completely different genre. I'm thinking about doing a thriller. That one, I'm going to need a completely different outline because it's going to be brand new characters. There's going to be things I haven't written before, and I'm going to need a different outline. When that happens, I will gladly show you guys how I do that. But that's how I do my outline. Bullet points, chapter. That's my process. That's how I do my thing. Now, again, I'll say this. However you want to do your outline, if you want to make it as detailed as possible, John Grisham makes a very detailed outline. He's told a story before that when he writes, he'll write his outline towards the end of the year. I don't know, to the middle, end of the year, so that January 1st rolls around, he sits down with his outline and he starts writing. And it takes him 3-4 months. Maybe. I'm not sure how long it takes him to write a book. I'm going to say 3 or 4 months. 3-4 months. Then he edits. Second round of editing, he gets the book ready, and then the book comes out. And while that's going on, he's working on the outline for his next book. So when January 1st rolls around, he starts the process all over again. I would love to have that kind of time. I would love to have that kind of, be able to just sit down every day and write. Unfortunately, books don't pay the bills right now. I have a day job, and maybe someday I'll become, famous and people start reading my books a lot, and I'll be able to, just focus all my time on writing. I have a lot of story ideas. I really wish I could. I really wish I could just write full time because I would write a lot. But I do what I can, and that's all you guys can do. Just do what you can. I hope this inspired you. I do. I hope that more than anything, you guys take this and start writing out your dreams. Write out what you want to write down. Get it on paper, because somewhere out there in that big crazy world, somebody wants to read your story. So don't let them down. Start writing. I'll see you guys later.